Hello, good people. Welcome to the Save Happy Life channel with me, Dr. Rose M. I am a guidance and counseling consultant, and we are running a series of effects of drug addiction in a family, that is to the other family members other than the person who is taking drugs. How does it affect the family? And we looked at the last 3 episodes where we talked about the drug staycations, where young people gather instead of going to school or work, and they stay in those homes that we talked about. You may want to go back to that video and refer to it. We also talked about the effects of drugs in the people who are in the family where we have a drug addict or a person who is using or abusing substance. And we also looked at the grieving process a family member goes through when they have a person who has a drugs problem. Today we look at challenges of going through this grief process when you have a family member that is using drugs. And these are the challenges of grieving or mourning the loss or associated with substance abuse by a child in the family or by a spouse in the family, in the family setting. And we have 5 challenges, and challenge number 1 we shall look at is that it is not easy. It is not easy to have a closure because grieving a person who is abusing drugs or who is using drugs is a moving target, because this person is still alive and the grief increases every day because the parent can see the drugs deteriorating the life of the child. They can, a spouse can see the life of the other spouse deteriorating as a result of drugs, and many other effects that come into play. So this becomes a continuous and evergreen grief, which is not easy to get closure about. The parent mourns the child who is alive because they no longer are able to do the things that they used to do before they became drug addicts. And the same with the spouse. It's different from death because when we are mourning somebody who has passed on, there is that level where we put them in their place of rest, and that ceremoniously and ritually brings some form of closure to the grieving family members. It is not the same, yet there is loss. Challenge number 2, the stigma that comes with substance abuse in the society locks in the grief because this family is not able to talk about it, and when feelings are locked up in a person, they limit the therapeutic sharing that helps or enables or quickens the healing process. Challenge number 3, the inability of the concerned drug user to take up their responsibilities becomes the responsibility of the other family members. This is how. If, for example, this is a parent and the drug user is a grown child who has children of their own, and because of the effects of the drug, they are unable to take care of their children, these children become the responsibility of the grandparent. They are raised by the grandparent. So this parent of the drug user becomes the caregiver or the person who is raising the children of the drug addict. Challenge number 4. Drug abuse is a grieving process that is not validated by the community. If I have death in my family, people come and they just need to know that I have lost a family member. They bring themselves. They come to console me. There is that process that validates grief when somebody has passed on in the family. Grief when somebody has been lost to drugs is not validated by the community, and thus yourself as a parent who has a child who is in drugs, you have nobody coming to console you. You have nobody coming to comfort you. You are on your own. And this makes this grieving process a little bit more complicated because the society has not validated it, and therefore they do not step in to help you go through the grief process. The other challenge number 5, is that society dims the hope of recovery. You hear statements in the society like, Bangi takes 12 years to get out of your head after you have smoked the last puff. It will take 12 years. So if a parent has a child who is in Bangi, you wonder, another 12 years? You see, the hope of recovery in the mind of this caregiver, in the mind of this parent, is diminished. Then you hear other statements like, alcohol eats up the liver until it drops in the stomach like something cold. That tells the person who is living with an alcoholic that the liver is totally gone and there is no hope. Society deems, or society validates a situation that drug recovery is recovery from drugs of addiction is not possible. You will also hear statements like, rehab is very expensive. Counseling is very expensive. So where does that leave you as a parent who has a child who has a problem with addiction? It becomes a challenge to go through this process, to mourn or to grieve through this process when you have such negative energy coming from the society. So with all these challenges, what next for you, parent? If you have a child who is in drugs, what next for you, wife or husband, if your wife or your husband has a challenge with drugs? Here is some coping skills, how to cope with substance abuse grief. Number 1, we just said that the society does not validate this kind of grieving, and therefore it does not have rituals to help you cope with the grief. It does not have prayers, it does not have funeral, it does not have cleansing rites. So it is up to you as the person who is going through this grief to develop coping rituals for yourself. And this is how you edify yourself. You learn about the problem that your child or your spouse is going through. Read as much as you can about it so that you understand them, so that you understand the problem. The next one, join support groups, even if they are online, even if they are one-on-one. The other one is exonerate yourself from the person who is using the drugs, because it is not you to blame for their behavior. They have only themselves to blame for their behavior. Their failures cannot be your failures. For example, if a child fails to complete school and you took the child through school. It is not your failure. Detach yourself from this problem and look at yourself separately, because you are the person who is grieving. For them, they are going through their normal process. By the way, if they have not even decided to stop, for them it is a happy-go-lucky life. They have no issue. It is you who has a problem, and it is you we are addressing today as the caregiver of this person who is using drugs. For example, if your daughter is unable to raise a child that they have gotten, and you have the ability to raise that child, raise the child, and detach yourself from the failure of your daughter in terms of failing to raise their own child. It pays dividends when you step aside, you step backwards, and you look at yourself as the individual. I look at myself as Rose. You look at yourself as Jane, as Martin, as Grace, as James, whatever your name is, and exonerate, remove yourself from the person who is using the drugs. Number 2, another coping skill: identify the loss. Single out that many years have been lost. For example, your child will never graduate because they lost years in school, so the graduation will never come. The mental soundness of the child may have been interfered with, and thus they will go through depression. They might even become psychotic. Identify the loss. The freedom of your child may be lost because they are locked up in jail. Identify the loss. Identify that loss. They may have had an accident in a fit of their drunkenness. They lost a limb. Identify that loss so that you know what exactly you have lost. Number 3, after you identify the loss, authenticate or validate and admit that you are grieving, and patiently go through the process no matter how painful. Recognize the emotions that you're feeling rather than denying them. For instance, if you feel very angry with your child or with the situation that you're going through because of this drug addict in the family, walk to your bathroom mirror and tell yourself, it's not me. I got to be happy. I have myself to take care of me. And in that way, you take a deep breath, exhale, and you let your whole self be filled with pleasant thoughts. Think pleasant thoughts about yourself. Fill yourself with pleasantness. Number 4, another coping skill when you have a child or a person and a spouse who is addicted to drugs of addiction: slice or cut up your grief. Remember that you are not the first person to experience this, and neither are you the last. So, slice up your grief into small, manageable pieces. And this is how. I give an example. For example, if your son, your grown son, maybe 28 years old, maybe 25 years old, is a bang user and he has been arrested by police, and he has a child who he has left at your doorstep, instead of coming to rant about the person who has been arrested and he's in good custody of the police, you think about this child who has been left at your doorstep, this 1-year-old child who has been left at your doorstep, hungry and crying and maybe wet and needing a lot of attention. Take care of this child first, because this is the immediate problem. This is slicing the problem, slicing your grief. Once you take care of this child, the child is calm and maybe even asleep, then you can now start thinking objectively without immediate distractions about the father who has been arrested by the police. You'll be able to think more objectively, you'll be able to be less angry and therefore healthier, or in a better frame of mind to cope with the grief. Number 5, be compassionate about yourself, because if you do not, no one will. Tell yourself it is okay, it will be fine, and you validate yourself. You tell yourself good things, comfort yourself. Tell yourself you will go through, it will pass. Because if you do not tell yourself that, my dear friend, the rest of us in the society, we do not understand your situation and we shall not be compassionate with you. If anything, we might laugh at you, at your poor parenting skills. Number 6, and the last one we shall look at, is recognize your limitations. In the earlier episode, we said that you are not the drug user, and therefore you cannot stop the drug use because you are not using the drugs. Rather, start realizing the fact that you are not the drug user, and thus the obligation to stop using the drug does not lie with you, but with your son who is using drugs, with your daughter who is on drugs, with your husband who is on drugs, with your wife who is an alcoholic. So the change in the drug user can only come from them. It can only be achieved by them. This is where you realize your limitation, that no matter what you do, unless the person has decided to stop, the best you can do is to support them through the change when they are ready to change, or educate them on the change and the need to change, but not when they are not willing. They have to be willing to be helped, because this is a personal behavior, this is a personal problem, and it is only them who can get themselves out of it. You can only support with a good environment, support with good hygiene, good diet if they are within your care of feeding, support with counseling services, and all else you can. But the core thing about changing the behavior lies with the person. So recognize your limitations and you will be happy, surprisingly so, and you have a happy life even though your son, your daughter, your spouse may be in drugs, because you will have managed the coping process of taking care of, or being in a family where a person is using drugs of abuse. Thank you very much. I'm glad you have been with me through to the end, and I can only request you, once you have been blessed by something, bless another person. Share. Thank you very much, and God bless you.